Hey friends, welcome to another edition of Big Al's Rockin' Podcast. I have return guest Tim Durling here. He is from Tim's Vinyl Confessions, and I've already stuttered, so we got that out of the way. And he's got a book called The Sounds That Haunt You, A Beginner's Companion to Fleetwood Mac. And this book does not focus solely on the commercial successfully era of the band, but a few different eras and a few lineup changes. Let me read the blurb on the back because that's what my note tells me to do. Fleetwood Mac, a band with several distinct lives, the hard driving blues of the Peter Green led lineup, the dreamy soft rock that defined the Bob Welsh era of the early 70s, the turbulent but undeniably potent chemistry of the Buckingham Nicks years. It all adds up to a confusing but ultimately rewarding catalog of music. But where does one begin? So, what was the inspiration for this book and when did you decide to write it?
Well, the inspiration came from my mother-in-law, actually. And because once I started doing books, obviously I've got great support from my family. And my mother-in-law is a huge Fleetwood Mac fan. She passed that along to my wife, who kind of introduced me to the band, but I'll get into that in a second. So it kind of all makes sense. But she said, this is quite a while ago. Oh, Tim, when are you going to write me a book on Fleetwood Mac? And she wasn't serious because the books I'd been writing, she knows that I tend to write about more, harder rock bands or, more heavy guitar driven bands. But I thought about it and I kind of thought my first thought was like, well, there are so many books out there on this band that have been written by, music journalists and writers and band members themselves. McFleetwood put a book out. There's been books that have been written just that deal with the Rumors album. So, and I always say, if I can't come up with a unique angle, I'm not going to bother adding, to the already existing books that are out there. But like I said, my wife Sarah got me into this band. Now, when I say got me into it, obviously uh, you know, I knew Fleetwood Mac, but I only knew them from the radio. I didn't know anybody. There was nobody in my family that was a fan, so I wasn't familiar with the albums. I didn't know the complicated history of, everything that happened before the Buckingham Nicks lineup. And really, it was just, they were just kind of one of those bands that I knew a little bit about, but really didn't care one way or another. But when Sarah and I got together, she played a lot of Fleetwood Mac. She had a lot of Fleetwood Mac on her playlists, and I got to hear songs that I'd never heard before, some of the album tracks, and I really started to understand that, well, there's a lot to this band. And Lindsey Buckingham is an amazing guitar player, and well, no wonder so many people like this band and these albums. So, and then I started to kind of dip my toes into the catalog a little bit, and it's a complicated catalog. I mean, the self-titled album from 1975, the breakthrough album for them, was their 10th album. I mean, this was not an overnight sensation. And they only put the first record out in 68, so there was like album after album, two a year sometimes. So in the end, you've got this huge catalog. So where would someone begin if they wanted to go past, the Buckingham Nicks era, or if they've got the greatest hits album or the dance or so I thought, okay, yeah, let's write a book about the kind of book that would have helped me when I was trying to get into the band. Like, where do you even start? So that's why I called it a beginner's companion. I usually say it's a listener's guide or it's an album guide. That's really what it is, but it's also meant to help somebody navigate their way through. Like, they may have a very, very, deep knowledge of everything from, say, Rumors, or Fleetwood, the self-titled Rumors, Tusk, Mirage, Tango in the Night. But everything before that, they don't really know much of anything about, and there's a lot that came after. So this is all of their albums are described here. Or there's a chapter on each, and all of those songs that only appeared on compilations, B-sides. I tried to collect those. I tried to document every officially released Fleetwood Mac song as well as I could to give somebody an idea of if you're going to dive into this catalog, here's where the albums are, and here's what I think of them. Here's kind of what I think they sound like. So that was kind of the idea. I started writing it. Oh, it would have been earlier this year. I mean, I put the Night Ranger book out earlier this year, but I know I was working on this before that came out. I was starting to write a chapter at a time. This one's different. Excuse me. This one's different than my previous books on Night Ranger and Kansas and Y&T. This one's like my Sammy Hagar book because it's just me writing it. It's not a panel discussion book.
Right on. Now, did Fleetwood Mac also have another self-titled album in the early days?
Yeah, their very first album came out in 1968. It's just self-titled. Now, some people call it Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, or some people call the other album Fleetwood Mac 1975. But yeah, they do have two completely different self-titled albums.
Not confusing at all.
No, no, not at all. And because the 75 album was the breakthrough, I'm sure a lot of people just thought that was the first album and Rumors was the second, but nope.
Right. So you said you started this book earlier this year. From the initial idea to the final draft, about how long did it take?
It really didn't take me that long. That's one of the things that I like about the books that I write just me because I'm not waiting on don't get me wrong, I love the panel books. I'm working on one now. Those work very, very well. They're great ways to gather content. I like doing them both. For this one, I thought, well, okay, this one's kind of personal. I do want it to be just me, and they do come together more quickly. For one thing, there's not as much content. You can easily notice it's a shorter book. It's an easy read, but I think it it achieves what I wanted it to. But it didn't take me very long. I did a chapter at a time, which is to say an album at a time, but I didn't do them in order. I went all over the catalog, like zigzagging all over the place. I didn't want to do all the Peter Green era albums in a row. I didn't want to do all the Bob Welch albums in a row. I wanted to come into it fresh, listening to something that was completely different before I started listening to the album that I was about to write about.
Well, that seems like a good idea to me because I'm like squirrel when I'm listening to anybody's catalog, not just Fleetwood Mac. What was the most difficult part of this project?
The most difficult part of the project was making sense of the early period between 67 and 69. Um, That's because that band was so prolific. Technically, they only released three albums. So there is that self-titled one from 68. Also in 68, they did an album called Mr. Wonderful. And then the third album in 69 was just Play On. And those were the only studio albums of the Peter Green era. But that's not close to all the music they did. So Mr. Wonderful didn't originally come out in North America in 1968. Instead, what we got over here was a compilation called English Rose. Right away, the catalog starts to get confusing. Some songs are the same, some songs aren't. In the UK, they didn't get English Rose. They got one called The Pious Bird of Good Omen, which again, some songs are the same, some songs aren't. Then there were all of those songs they did with the Chicago Blues Players in 1969. There's a double album. Sometimes it's called Fleetwood Mac in Chicago. Sometimes it's called the Chicago Blues Sessions. It's been released under different titles. A lot of them are covers, but not all of them are. There's a lot of originals. So trying to make sense of those was really complicated. Songs that only came out when deluxe versions of some of the early albums came out. That early period was the hardest one for me to make sense of, and okay, how am I going to do this? But I think I did a pretty good job sorting it all out because you're getting back into an era in the 60s where there were a lot of bands that still were putting out singles by themselves that didn't have an album connected to it, right? So like Fleetwood Mac's case, they had songs like Man of the World, one of their best known UK hits. It doesn't belong to any one album. So it gets kind of confusing. But I think that I was able to corral it in so somebody that knew of a song Well, where did that come from? If they don't find it in the main chapters that cover the studio albums, they'll find it in that other section.
That sounds to me like if you're a completist collector, it's kind of a nightmare.
Well, it is very, very complicated, but the early years, and I know I've got a picture of it in here somewhere, um, and something that I referred to a lot. Um, there's a fantastic box set. Excuse me, we're both suffering with colds here as we're
Yeah,
filming
I
this.
muted my camera and coughed at the same time you did yours.
We're just yeah, it's like a really weird ventriloquist act. Oh, I know I got a picture of it here somewhere. Of course, I can't find it. But anyway, it's a box set called the Complete Blue Horizon Sessions, and that came out in the late '90s on Sire Records, and that covers the Peter Green period pretty well. Not quite everything because then Play On came out on Reprise Records, so they had switched labels. But this collects the Fleetwood Mac, Mr. Wonderful, English Rose. Not no, sorry, not English Rose. English Rose is not on there because yeah. Pious Bird of Good Omen. It's got the two CD set of the blues sessions from Chicago, and then it's even got another CD called the original Fleetwood Mac, which has another bunch of songs that didn't appear on any one album. So that's your best bet. You can display them as the individual CDs, or you could just keep them all in the box. That's a really easy way to get them all at once.
Very cool. I noticed that there were some graphics other than just album covers in there. Did you have any trouble licensing any of that?
All of the pictures in my books are from my own collection. So I kind of own the pictures, and I always put a disclaimer in the beginning of the books like this, this is not an official publication. It's used for identification purposes only. I've never grabbed like graphics off the internet. If it's a picture of something that I myself have purchased.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So
Knock
you'll
on wood, that's worked so far.
you'll have to sue yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, what is your favorite and least favorite Fleetwood Mac eras?
Wow. Okay. Boy, that's a tough one. Oh, that's a tough. The least favorite is easy, I'm afraid. And the least favorite only consists of one album, and that's an album that came out in 1995 called Time, and generally considered the low point of their career. This was just prior to Lindsay and Stevie coming back for them doing the Dance album and tour and being a big band again.
Yeah.
But by the time that Time came out, Lindsay was long gone. Stevie was gone. Christine had sort of like one foot out the door. The two guitarists that they had brought in to replace Lindsay, starting with the Tango in the Night tour, Rick Vito and Billy Burnett. Rick Vito was now gone. Billy Burnett had left and come back halfway through the recording. They brought in Becca Bramlett, the daughter of Delaney and Bonnie Bramlett, um, ostensibly to cover the Stevie stuff, I guess. And then Dave Mason, as in Dave Mason from Traffic and Dave Mason, like We
Hmm.
Just Disagree, solo artist in his own right. He joined the band. Very strange lineup of Fleetwood Mac, and not a very good album, in my opinion. I'm quite blunt about my opinion about it. I think there's one song on there that's decent. So that's the least favorite. Favorite, that's such a tough one because, I mean, so many of the Buckingham Nicks era songs are so iconic, and yet I've also discovered so many favorite songs that were never singles, tucked away on albums like Mirage and Tango in the Night. But, I'm going to say right now, I'm on a pretty big high about the Bob Welch era. I've gained a whole new appreciation of those albums that came out between 71 and 74, that a lot of those are overlooked and you never hear songs from them on the radio. And there are a lot of songs that radio programmers should really dig up off of those albums and start throwing into rotation. And I think they'd find that they'd be selling some more copies of those early albums. So, um, yeah, I'm going to go with the Bob Welch era right now because I've been listening to a lot of those albums.
Fair enough. Now you said that that one album was by far the least favorite album. Do you have a favorite Fleetwood Mac album?
Well, now having said that, I like the Bob Welch era a lot. It might seem obvious, but I'm going to go Tango in the Night. I think that's a fantastic album. Now that album was actually, when I first started listening to the radio, like listening to top 40 radio and really paying attention to music in a not just a background noise way, was around 85. So Tango in the Night was the first time there was a new Fleetwood Mac album out when I was kind of listening to popular radio. And that had four big hits off it. Not that I was into the band at the time, but it's the first time I was kind of aware of them as a new group. It always was like, oh yeah, well they're an old band. You know what I mean? You didn't hear about you heard about them, but you didn't hear them. Well, now you were hearing them. But as I got into the band, I kept going back to Tango in the Night, and I think that album is magnificent. I mean, I think that it's for one thing, for a 1987 album, it doesn't sound like it's from 1987. I think the production is immaculate. I think it's held up well. I don't think it sounds dated. Um, I got the 30th anniversary edition, and there are about seven extra songs that weren't on the album, and those are all really good too. Like it was a very, even though it was the last, really, it was the last album of that classic lineup because they never did a studio album again, those five. Boy, they went out with a bang. Like it was a strong, inspired album. I know there's not a lot of Stevie on it, but I just think every song on that album is a killer.
All right. Is there anything you'd like to mention that we've yet to cover?
Well, one of my favorite parts of doing this, because like I said, it was a book written by myself, so it doesn't have the content that my panel books have. Like my Night Ranger book is almost 300 pages because you get all those people commenting and talking about the albums. The content, builds itself up, which is fantastic. This, it all had to come from me, and I didn't want it to be too short a book. So there's a section in this book where I set out to find 100 unique covers of Fleetwood Mac songs done by 100 different artists. And that means like I didn't include six versions of The Chain, five versions of Landslide. There are 100 unique songs by 100 unique artists spanning the catalog, starting from their first album in 68 all the way up to the Say You Will album in 2003. People have covered songs from those albums. And in doing that, I heard so many different interpretations of Fleetwood Mac songs. Some I thought were really good, some I didn't care for, some were just kind of, huh? And then some were just complete reinventions of the song. And the artists that have done their songs range from, folk to blues to ambient, uh, country, metal. It's all over the place. There are French language covers of some of their songs, so it's really interesting how this band has impacted, as a whole. And so yeah, I thought I that was a really fun chapter to research, and I people are getting back to me and saying I had no idea that such and such covered a Fleetwood Mac song. So yeah, that's another part of the book I thought was I'm glad that it came to me to do that.
Well, that is fantastic. I do a radio show on A to Z Radio, and about once a month I do a segment called Every Band is a Cover Band. And I do have a cover of Landslide that I do plan on playing on that episode. So this will give me more fodder for future episodes.
Oh man, like it runs deep. I mean, you've got the Pointer Sisters and Leif Garrett and Vivian Campbell and like artists I've never even heard of, but they've covered Fleetwood Mac. I mean, the thing that it's important for people to know too, especially if they don't know much about the early years, Black Magic Woman by Santana is a Fleetwood Mac song.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the most famous Fleetwood Mac cover, right? But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. I may not like all of the covers, but it's there for people to check out. And yeah, at one point or another, I mean, Fleetwood Mac did lots of covers in their early years. They did a lot of Elmore James, they did Willie Dixon, they did a lot of blues covers. And then even as the years went along, they would cover things like For Your Love by the Yardbirds and not a lot as the years went on, but would be a few that would pop up.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of your other books earlier in this episode. Give us a plug for some of those other books.
Okay, well, thanks. Yeah, so my first book was Unspooled, an adventure in eight tracks, which I had the pleasure of talking to you about earlier, which talks about eight tracks that were manufactured, by the record clubs most of the way through the 1980s, including um, a show. I got a picture. I think I showed it off in the episode, but um, that's my eight track of Tango on the Night. So that's 1987. So that gives you an idea of, and actually, one of my grails is the 1988 Greatest Hits album, the green cover with the flower on it. That exists as a Columbia House 8 track, and I'd love to find it. So that was my first book. Then I did Y&T, Down for the Count, the Y&T album review. That continues to be my biggest selling book by quite a lot. People were hungry for a book about that band. They were never a huge band, but they've got a rabid following all over the world. Then Kansas, Let It Be Your Guide. That's the Kansas album review. Both of those books are panel discussion books. Then Red on Black, Listener's Guide to Sammy Hagar. That's Sammy's solo stuff, all of his solo albums. And yeah, just earlier this year, Sing Me Away, the Night Ranger album review, which is another panel book. So and I'm currently got two more that I'm working on, and they're one's pretty much done and one's almost done. But yeah, right now I'm just in full promo mode for this. But I've always thinking of other bands that I could try and cover.
Right on. Tell my followers where they can follow you. Yes, they can follow you. That's good. Where they can find you online.
Yeah. Well, all my books are available through Amazon all over the world, wherever country you're in. So there's no duties or anything like that. If you live in the UK, order from Amazon UK. Tim's Vinyl Confessions on YouTube. I've had that channel going now since 2014. Actually, if you go to timsvinylconfessions.com, it'll just take you to the YouTube channel. I kind of rent the URL so someone else doesn't take it. I don't know why anybody else would, but maybe someday I'll create a site out of it. And I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I post daily stuff from my collection, and 3 new episodes a week, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And right now, still in the fairly early stages of doing a deep dive series through every Fleetwood Mac album as a companion to this book. So yeah, we haven't even hit the Buckingham Nicks era yet. So we're just getting started.
Sounds like fun. Thank you for your time, and I'll catch you again soon.
Thank you very much, Alan, for having me on. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Big Al's Rockin' Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe on your preferred podcast outlet. Visit BigAlRocks.com to find past episodes, on-demand links to my radio show, links to my social media, and other Big Al shenanigans. Most importantly, please like and share this episode. Peace out.